Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday, May 25th edition of Mapleton Township Council. It's nice to see everyone again, and it's a beautiful day. Looks like Mike has a great spot to be doing the council meeting with everything behind him, outdoor. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Confirmation of minutes. Recommendation that the minutes of the Township of Mapleton Council meeting held on May 11th, 2021 be confirmed as circulated in the agenda pack. A mover for that, please. Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Ottens. Anybody wish to speak to it? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 7. We have delegations. We have with us today from SEMA, Lawrence Kulip, and we're going to talk about the arena. Lawrence with us?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, Lawrence is just joining us this moment.
All right. We'll wait till Lawrence hooks up then.
Go off mute there. There we go. Hello.
Hello, Lawrence. You've got the floor, my friend.
Wow. I just clicked on and everybody's standing there waiting. Perfect.
Jump right in.
Okay, so I'll jump in the form of sharing my screen, but I'll just quick introduction. So I'm the senior architect with SEMA, and I work out of our Toronto-based offices, and we've been pulling together some ideas and have your feedbacks. And the presentation today is really going to be sort of revisitation of the design ideas that we put forward as part of the subsidy assistance program. So having said all that, let me get my screen. And maybe you can let me know when that comes up on screen and everybody can see it. Yep, Greg's giving me the thumbs up, so good to go. Let me just minimize that box. Okay, so normally we start with a site plan, which is our second drawing. So I'm going to start there. We have taken the various comments from our first go round. I'm not going to show that diagram. I don't think that's of any use at this point in time. So I'm going to go through some high-level design ideas that we're pursuing as part of this renovation project to the arena. And we'll start with the site plan. So when I drill down into the planning part that you'll see next in terms of the actual spatial ideas and adjacencies for actual rooms and spaces within the building, that'll tell you a little bit more, but hopefully everybody's familiar with looking at site plans. They have some sense of what the overall building is going to look like. So the overarching process is to look at significant programming and architectural building additions that are going to accommodate some great new ideas and programming initiatives, all within a certain pricing, costing, let's say, envelope that I'm sure, Sam, you and the leadership team have talked about. I'm sure it's okay to talk about that here, but without getting mired into the dollars, the benchmark we're looking at is $10 million as sort of the envelope that we have to work within. So the major components of what we're proposing here have to do with new programming and new spaces that would add new building. I'm going to call this, even though the drawing's oriented this way, normally I'm going to call that north to the left on this plan because anyway, on the south side of the building, a whole new addition here. So the existing hall, community hall or multi-purpose room would disappear and we would build new. And that new building would be basically a 2-story structure with sufficient height to accommodate the programming needs inside. We'd add a new entrance piece at the back here with the drop-off area, and we would add a new major component to the front of the building, again with another covered, semi-covered drop-off area here. Eliminate this condition right now. Look at maybe a little softscape along the back half of the building. I know there is an ice machine, and the Zamboni room is right here. So some of the detailing to get access to that we can work around in the next iteration very easily, I think. The idea was as well to provide an accessible playground piece somewhere in this back. Our sense was that it made sense to have it somewhat close to the building for washroom access and other things rather than a little more remotely. So that is why we moved it away a little bit from where we had it positioned initially on the first go round, which is right here. And then the parking area is, of course, by and large unchanged. We have shown one approach to photovoltaics, which would not only include the parking PV potentially on the new roofs and possibly the arena roof, with a little bit of exploration from a structural point of view that needs to be looked at quickly. But there's also an opportunity to do PV charging, which has been at a number of locations now at grade, essentially, built on a gantry that allows the PV to actually accommodate two things at once. One is some sort of vehicle protection, believe it or not, and also provide the actual clear view to the sky that you need to get the benefit of PV. This could also be electrical vehicle charging stations that integrated with the PV system at grade here, in addition to whatever we can accommodate on the roof. So very high level still in the idea about photovoltaic. I think that's the biggest bang for the buck, rather than just green roofs, which do have some place in sustainable design. When it's not seen or it's not an amenity, it can be kind of a, I wouldn't call it, maybe not the best value for the money for that. So I'm going to just, and you can stop me whenever if you have a question. I'm going to just move into the planning part and just talk about the main ideas behind what we're showing right now that are reflected in the site plan I just showed you. So in no particular order, just sort of running up the page, we've tweaked and adjusted the entrance piece a little bit. There'd be a major canopy component to that where you could do drop-offs and people could wait undercover. The idea being that along with other enhancements that we may be able to provide along the main face of the arena, facing on a main street, we see this entrance piece as being a fairly contemporary, architecturally glass box with sort of a roof piece that would have some presence to help animate and bring the elevation of the building into a lot more contemporary view, have a much better street presence, much better visibility. And being fully glazed would allow for a lot of animation. You can see people coming and going. This would be a great place to have not only large groups pre-gathering if they needed to disperse into other parts of the building, but also could be a venue for an event where you're having a trade or a vendor show. You could have kiosks and whatnot, greeting play, a sort of entry greeting area here. So it's a large scale space, but in our experience dealing with assembly type buildings like this, you can't, I wouldn't say you can't make them large enough, but it's certainly, you don't want to diminish the whole idea of having a large, welcoming, open area to bring people in. It's also fairly low cost because you could be talking about some very, very basic finishes. The extent of glazing is probably the biggest ticket item, and then you can do some nice things with lighting that really animate the space. Then there'd be some allocations by moving the office piece, for instance, out of where it sits right now up into this portion of the floor plan. So now you can increase the sort of circulation availability through this new entrance piece, which is essentially a large foyer into sort of the more inner workings of the building through a couple of entrances, the existing one, and you can add another one here. And then of course you've got access into the arena as well. So I think it serves multiple purposes that way. The main built pieces, again, no particular order, would be the multi-court two-story functional piece here, and then added onto the back of that would be a multi-purpose room, which could be divided up into 2 halves with a movable wall. Fairly large rooms that could accommodate, of course, a number of different functions, hence the name, and different sizes. The idea being here, we've added this, as you saw before, this second entrance piece, which is sort of the back door, but which may prove to be a very useful piece when you're having maybe a large event happening on ice or in the arena space. You could have something else happening here, and you could also have people who are attending these areas come in through this entrance, which might be a nicer feed, and kind of disperse the crush issues you might face with a larger group of people in the building at once. We've taken some of the cues we got and some of the comments to create an addition here to accommodate the figure skating club and reorient some of the change rooms to make that happen here. Include that connecting link with a corridor into the figure skating club. We've added space in this former change room to become kitchen, and move again that office piece up here. There's some, I guess needs to be maybe a little more meaningful discussion about what the kitchen would actually function as, whether it's truly a commercialized thing or whether it's more of a servery where food is prepared pretty much, at least hot food might be prepared elsewhere, and just more of a warming kitchen and servery here. The other piece, we've done away with some of the rooms and spaces here, which was the former kitchen and servery area. I think there's a boardroom as well in here. So the notion behind this space here now becomes, opens this up for a little more crush space and gathering areas between the multi-court and the arena, and provides more in terms of circulation and storage. So the idea being here, we introduce an elevator. I know we have talked about ramping, but at this stage, our presentation today centers on the idea of providing an elevator to get provide access to the new second floor, and a large, we call this a fitness stair. It's pretty common in more fitness-oriented operations where you make a bit of a design effort to make the stair kind of a feature within the space. So it becomes almost a fitness training area, running stairs as well as getting you up to the second floor. The multi-court area here would accommodate a full-size regulation basketball court, plus which would also give you the height you need. Plus it could be divided up and would be divided up to provide multi-court line markings for things like volleyball, pickleball, some indoor soccer as well. So all of that could happen within the multi-court space here with the perimeter of a sort of buffer zone perimeter. We've added some storage space as a pop-out along this side of the building. We'd include a fair bit of glazing to bring in as much natural light as possible to try and mitigate on the cost and of just of electricity, so that you're using daylighting as a maximum piece, which is also a key item in most sustainable design. Moving up into the second floor, the proposition here is to build an elevated running or walking track, which would encircle the large new multi-court space at about 3.5 meters above floor. So about 12 feet up in the air, we'd have the running track surrounding the multi-court, of course, full visibility down into the court area below, accessed by the stair here, by inadvertent or indirectly by the exit stair, which is required here in this corner, and of course by the elevator with its own small elevator lobby, which is also a code requirement. The proposition is to limit the second floor rather than build over here. The idea is just build that over as a single story addition here, and the true two-story addition is this piece around here. We've incorporated some rest areas within the elevated running track areas, so people can stop, take a break, and essentially get out of the way. The other spaces within the second floor here include a series of boardrooms. These could be demised with movable partitions if there was a demonstrated need to have a very large room up here that could and might need to be divided up that way. Or these could be fixed hard partitions. You can see these are fairly large rooms that would accommodate a number of people. for whatever purposes are necessary. And then we've created a fair bit of circulation space. Again, our experience when you may have multiple sessions happening. Within these spaces, you need some crush space. Otherwise, you don't want people bleeding out into a tiny or a narrow corridor where it gets kind of crushed and confined. Would be fully accessible, of course, and that would, hence the connection with the elevator and the track. I shouldn't really call it an elevator running track. Maybe it's an elevator walkway, be a better word for it. We provide some additional washrooms up here, which would be critical to meet the occupancy count here. Plus, there's obviously a major convenience factor if you're in the boardroom up here and you need to use the facilities. They're much better placed here than all the way down here. And then we've included some space for storage. So all told, we're looking at a total new build of approximately 21,000 and change square feet, and about 6,700 square feet of renovation space within this area down here. And all of that is heading to stay within that $10 million window that we talked about, that I mentioned earlier as part of the funding stream. As far as we haven't explored in any major way yet construction systems, i.e., what are we going to use to build this with? Are we looking at wood, for instance? Is that a possibility to use mass timber, which is delivering a lot of scores in terms of if this was actually pursuing a LEED designation, that would be something that we'd probably put on the table. But there are other options outside of that. So we haven't explored in any real detail materiality, but suffice to say, the main goal is to provide the enhanced programming through these spaces and provide an enhanced aesthetic to the building to bring it up to a more contemporary standard. Community rec centers, arenas, as you I'm sure know across the province, generally the new builds are frequently very decorative and attractive buildings. In many cases, they have received a lot of attention in the design community for features that we're trying to include here. So that sort of, I think, captures most of our current ideas on this. So maybe I'll keep the screen up. I don't know if there are any questions we want to talk about right now.
Actually, Lawrence, if you could take the screen down, please. Thank you. Okay. So questions from members of council. We have Council Craven up first.
Lawrence, does this include an observation room upstairs to watch over the hockey?
We didn't include that. It's a little distant. It wouldn't necessarily be impossible to consider maybe an upper deck, an upper area here. We've tried to stay away from adding any second floor components over the existing building. The cost of doing that is not prohibitive, but it's significant to get into this part of the building and have to build structure to support anything happening above. So nothing's impossible. It could be accommodated. I think we'd have to take a serious look at the numbers to make sure that we weren't going to impact on that.
Okay.
Mr. Ottens?
Yes, thank you. I'm looking at the plan, and the kitchen is an area that I want to address here. I do feel like the way the plan sits now, the office should be added to the kitchen, and the office would be relocated elsewhere, perhaps by the stairs and elevator area. And the reason for that, I was discussing this. Everyone I've discussed this with so far is very excited. But there is concerns that we wouldn't really be able to host things like the gala and the farm show without a usable full kitchen to serve people out of. So I think that the kitchen should take the office space as well and have a serving window on the side that faces the ice. Mm-hmm. And that way, and a door to the kitchen coming off that blue entrance area, because if there's a group, say the seniors are in the multi-purpose room, right, and they want to have a dinner or something, that's easy access to go back and forth with food service. So that's a big deal, is to not have a kitchen to some groups, because we have the hospital gala, we have minor hockey days, we have the farm show, and I can see more day-long tournament style events happening here that groups would want to serve food. So I do think a full kitchen is something we still need to have.
Thank you, Councillor Ottens. Lawrence, Councillor Ottens is our resident cook and
Former
caterer. So
so I used
cook
to
and
work
caterer.
in,
So she does a lot of this and has done in the past. So
Okay.
she knows about kitchens.
Well, yeah, and it's fortunately there is an opportunity, as you say, you know, the office piece could easily move and the kitchen could enlarge, and then you could have that interface on both ends of it, so that you could provide the server. We thought the kitchen was actually in a good spot there because you could get deliveries from the back
yes,
and not interrupt the front of house, let's say, stuff. So okay.
yeah,
I do like the kitchen in that location, Lawrence. I think when I redid my plan, that's a location of the kitchen. And I agree with Councillor Ottens to have a larger kitchen. It's something that we probably could also market to local, businesses, that people making sauce or people making whatever they're making and distributing. If they need a commercial type kitchen, it's probably something that economic development wise, it'd be good to have that way. So we can market it as a rental space if it's done right.
Right.
Further questions? Councillor Ottens again?
yeah, sorry, I just also wanted to say that I do think we also need the kitchen because we do want to keep options open of having a bar space in this facility so
Mhm.
that it would also serve as a bar area for licensed events, because otherwise I see no bar area in the facility at all. So that's something. And I guess one other tiny little thing, the vestibule in the front entry area, does that have to remain or can that be eliminated?
Into the arena.
Yes.
Yeah, that could disappear. In fact, we didn't get into the nitty gritty, but yeah,
Okay.
that would probably blow that away, and basically the entrance, there'd be an airlock at the main entrance door once you first come into the space, and then you would not need a second vestibule.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ottens, and thank you, Lawrence, for that answer. I had that same question, so thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Ottens. Other council members, Councillor Douglas?
Yes, I was just wondering if the CAO can maybe give an overview of why we're talking about this today, just for those who are tuning in.
Mr. Barron?
Yes, through your worship. Just not long ago, there was an email sent from Infrastructure Canada. And it was called Green and Inclusive Community Buildings, that basically outlined the funding opportunity that we're discussing today. Part of that funding is that if we want to qualify, we have to find 25% in energy efficiency improvements, which I think Lawrence has done a real good job at. There's different levels of funding, of course, up to 9 million or up to basically 10 million less a dollar. We would be funded for 80% of the cost of the project. And if we decided that we want to go from anywhere from 10 million to 25 million, it would be 60% funded from both levels of government, the federal and provincial government. So we quickly tossed it around, and as you know, decided that this is an opportunity maybe to expand the PMD arena. So quickly we got a hold of SEMA, and like I said, I think they've done a tremendous job in capturing most of our ideas and putting them to paper, what I would call very quickly, in a couple of weeks. This is basically a second version. So we would like to get this, I guess, all figured out and finalized so that we can provide the application in July or sooner. But yeah, we just thought let's take advantage of this. It's a great project, and I think it's much needed, and I think you would agree to that. And we just have to go through the motion. But it is a dual funded grant from the federal and provincial governments.
Mr. Barron? Anything further, Councilor Douglas?
Yeah, thanks for that. Just wondering, in terms of process, like we could get speaking about nitty-gritty details for an extended period of time here. if we submit how it is now and we get approved, like, are we committed to this exact layout, or is that just to secure the funding and then we can finesse some details? Just wondering how that will work.
Mr. Barron, do you know that answer?
I do not. I do know that the scoring, I mean, I can call and find that answer out, but I do know that there's a confidence rating on here, which normally, in my experience anyway, shows that they give points on how close to the actual project you are. But I can certainly call Infrastructure Canada and find out exactly what we can do.
Thank you. Councillor Ottens again? Did you have
Oh.
another question?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Sorry.
Further questions from members of council or thoughts? Councillor Martin?
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I love the look of this this plan that's come together pretty quickly. I got excited when Mr. Cudlip was talking about the new entrance, having something kind of modern looking versus the third world structure that's there at the moment is pretty exciting. So, and I love how that kind of, I'd be concerned about moving any other rooms back around into that open area where the snack bar and the executive boardroom is at the moment. I love that that's all opened up, and I'd love to see it stay that way. That really feels like an area that people congregate at the moment. And I think moving forward, that just simply to have that space is important. I liked, until I heard Mr. Cudlip's response, I loved where Councillor Craven was going. I know not many people would talk about the Katy Community Center anymore, but having that warm, heated area overlooking the ice pad was something that was an idea I was throwing around here too. So it was interesting that Dennis brought that up. But and having that second story, I understand it. We run into cost issues there with the supporting infrastructure and stuff. But you could conceivably have a wide open space up there, a gathering space, a ball hockey space. The opportunities kind of would be endless over that kind of middle, space. But that multi-court, I think it's long overdue, and I've loved that idea since Paul brought it up. I do, if we're still in the spitballing phase and we're still in the, we can't spitball forever, but if we're still in the creating ideas phase, like I don't think we should be ruling out the second ice pad right off the top without actually having numbers. There'd be a pool, like that type of stuff. I'd love to see, and that would fundamentally alter the design, of course, as well. But I'd love to see some high level numbers, like if we push the 10 million, like, how our finances relate to that. I do understand we're on a time frame. I like, in principle, the idea of what this looks like, but I with the people that I've been talking to, like Marlene said, there's, people are pretty excited about something like this, right? And I think having a second ice pad, you'd open yourself up for abilities to actually host tournaments, right? We've got nearby municipalities that have single ice pads in different towns and they run tournaments, but it's kind of, you move back. We don't even get the chance to host these things. And, it's kind of hokey to move from one town to another. So to have two pads in one place, is something that could be interesting. I think if we're talking about having a commercial kitchen to run two events or one event that comes every 3 years, it's, I love the idea of a bigger kitchen too, Marlene, I do. But I think having a commercial kitchen that we're going to rent out, like, I don't know, I think that idea has sailed. We've tried that here in the past. But I think, that would be my comment. I think it's a great place to start, and I love the ideas that are on the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. And the kitchen, of course, would also be used for minor hockey when they have all their tournaments that we have, right? So that's something that's important for minor hockey. That's how they raise some of the money for the tournaments that they have there to feed all the kids that are coming in. Councillor Craven, could you turn your mic to mute, please? Because you're you're on there. Mr. Cullip, is there any indication of what we're doing right now? Are we nearing the $10 million mark, or is there's still room to, as Councillor Martin has said, a swimming pool or a second ice pad for that matter? Would that put us over that number?
I guess the short, not politically correct answer is, yeah, it would put you over. If you were going to do all of this, if you're going to make these additions that we're showing now, plus add an ice pad, never mind a pool, that's a whole different ball of wax. But these are significant investments in capital cost for sure. So right now we're hovering rough estimates. We're around the 9 million mark right now with site improvements and then these additions that we're proposing. Again, because they're at the high level, that there's not a lot of detail that would normally come out of a costing exercise as you get further into design. So I'd be a little cautious. Just if we're right now hovering around that 9 million mark, to push it closer to 10 could be a function of just the detailed design from here, right? So we're getting close. I think unfortunately, it might be a question of one or the other. Either you add another ice surface, which still might be beyond 10, or you do this. To do both, I think, would push the envelope for spending, which is out there, but then it's the funding issue. And I'd leave that to you folks to sort out the machinations of that. But just purely from a built perspective, yeah, I think right now what I'm showing you on screen is somewhere around $9 million worth of CapEx.
Thank you for that answer. That's pretty well clears up what we need. Councillor Martin, do you have a follow-up at all? No. Councillor Ottens?
Yes, through you, your worship. Just to address Councillor Martin's comment about the kitchen being used once every 3 years for the gala. I hate to be the woman here who has to fight for a kitchen, but there's ball hockey, there's minor hockey, there's the senior center, there would be day camp programming where it would be used. There's the farm show. These are all annual things. And then there's the future potential of dance, karate, gymnastics. A lot of these events, they have special events, they have special shows, and then they always like to serve food to add to their fundraising. So to me, that's the value of the kitchen, is the fundraising aspect of it for service clubs and sports teams. So that's my last hurrah for that.
Thank you, Councillor Ottens. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Craven?
Further to Marlene's comment, the figure skating club every third year also has some competitions that they do. They get quite a crowd of people in for it, take use of the kitchen. But I'm just wondering, nobody's mentioned it yet. One thing that they have at the Listowel Arena that seems to be quite popular is an area for mini sticks hockey. I just wonder if it would be possible to include something like that for mini stick hockey. You got kids that are 6, 7, 8 years old that come to hockey or figure skating, and they don't want to watch the hockey, they don't want to watch the figure skating. It gives them something else to entertain themselves with. I just wonder if something like that would be possible to incorporate.
I'm assuming that's something, Councillor Craven, that the multi-purpose room could accommodate if it's built that way.
Possible,
Mr.
yes.
Lawrence? Mr. Cullip?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could easily design the multi-purpose room to withstand the robustness required for Little Tykes mini stick tournaments, certainly in the type of flooring you use and stuff. So it could easily go there. It could also be in the multi-court area as well, right? You could section off a part of that for mini sticks. So there probably is lots of opportunities with these. I mean, don't forget that the basketball area is, let me just get some notes, is pretty significant. That's a fairly large footprint. So you could easily demise that space for some of those activities. If they were happening and you didn't have a basketball game going on, you could certainly let's get my note. We're certainly talking about a fairly big area. I mean, the basketball court is fairly large, right? It's 90 feet by about 90 by almost 50 feet. So yes, lots of room between that and the multi-purpose rooms.
Thank you, Mr. Cullip. Just a
Welcome.
question from me, sir. A couple of questions actually. So you got the multi-court there. It's a big basketball court. Is there also going to be two side, like smaller courts that you can have? Is
Oh,
that
yeah. We
from side
envision,
directions?
yeah, we would envision easily being able to divide that up into at least two or possibly 3, 4 volleyball courts or pickleball courts running not lengthwise, but crossways within that space. The other thing is that drives some of the cost, of course, is that the flooring for that court area would be a sprung wood floor that would facilitate all kinds of different markings so that you could have, as I say, basketball, volleyball, pickleball, inside soccer. There's a whole bunch of, sky's the limit, essentially. This is not unlike a large gymnasium in any school, for instance, that's multi-sport oriented.
Thank you. So my second question would be for the large court, whether it be a large basketball game or you're using a large court for a volleyball tournament in the final game. Is there any space at all for people to watch?
At the way we've laid it out right now, no, but it wouldn't be too difficult to stretch one side versus another to create either a compacting a rollout bleacher or a fixed bleacher to allow for a little more visibility. If that's something that is desirable, we'd probably suggest actually, yeah, that's not a bad idea to do that. Increase the square footage a little bit, so drive the cost a bit.
Yeah, I think that might be a good idea. And I think Ms. Gross here would probably be able to utilize that with some of her day programs as well, having the bleachers there. Certainly if we wanted to do, say, indoor movie night, we can have the bleachers and that would work for that. So I can see multi-uses for those bleachers. Further questions, comments from council? Mr. Martin.
Yeah, just to loop back to the kitchen again, I don't want Marlene to think that she's the woman fighting for the kitchen, because that's not at all the case. I think the kitchen is just it's a piece where I think you can very quickly sink a lot of money into, and we are getting rid of the hall with this particular project, right? So I don't want our identity to get too confused with what we're trying to do, right? So I think the majority of the events that have been listed, I think you could probably get away with a basic kitchen / servery layout. So I'm just not sure what that looks like as far as investment goes between a full, the kitchen that's there, one could argue isn't even that great. So like a full commercial kitchen versus a basic kitchen with more of a servery, like, is that 80,000 versus 25,000? I guess I would kind of form an opinion after I would see like a dollars and cents attached to something like that. But certainly a kitchen plays a role moving forward, even though the hall isn't there.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I believe you're right. The kitchen does play a role, and the nitty gritty later on will be, what do we actually want to accomplish with that kitchen? Is it going to be a full commercial or just something we can serve out of? As Councilor Ottens also said, serve alcohol if need be, because we lost that space as well. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Martin?
Thank you. Just one last one. I know we're not talking about the ice pad structure here, but the maybe another opportunity, if there's wiggle room in all this, is to redo the seating portion of the spectator area of the current hockey rink versus the whatever they are 2x10s that are laid down for seats. Something a little more modern, a little more comfortable. I'm not talking like bucket seats by any means, but something, maybe a plan worked in for something like that.
I believe, Mr. Cudlip, part of the discussions that you've been having with staff include a new seating arrangement, new heating for the fans, as well as the arena floor, has it not?
Yeah, we have been talking about some upgrades in that area as well. So yes, that could be accommodated. As you say, it's a balancing act between the must-haves and the nice-to-haves here. Keeping in mind too that the source of the funding criteria has a lot to do with the energy component to the upgrade. It's not just about providing new rooms and spaces. It's about doing something in a very sustainable design way. So there's some opportunities, for instance, for seating upgrades to look at recycled materials that you could identify as being things that you're incorporating now into the building that you don't have. So that's part of the discussion we're having. Yes.
So let me ask this, Council, are we somewhat happy with the second version that we've seen? Is there any one particular piece that you want to see removed out of that? Or something that's not there that you want to have there? Councillor Ottens.
One little thing I just noticed at the end, I wonder if the entry at the back, I guess, could be more flush with the figure skating room, just to give, I believe the word used was the clustering effect of people, just so there'd be a little more space as people are coming and going there. And I always think flush lines avoid these little pockets in a building that just become weed areas. So I wondered if that area could just be even.
Yeah, not a problem. You mean extend the entrance, the face of the entrance on the back to align with the figure skating club, maybe, or
I think so.
And move the wall. I think you're saying move the wall from the figure skating club back to meet the entrance wall, so it's a bigger space for the figure skating club. So you don't have that little
one or the other,
space.
as long as it's flush and then the entry has a little more space, just so that it's not like a corridor with people coming in from one event and coming in for the next one, and it gets very crowded, especially in the winter. Just a thought.
Okay, sure. We can do that.
I think I'm on the same page. Is that the way it's built there? Is there's that little alcove that's going to be a dead area. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So if we can move that wall back and meet up with the entrance, then
yes, agreed.
Do something else with that.
Yep.
Maybe another storage room. I don't know. We'll figure that out.
Yep.
Anybody else that thoughts before we finish this up? Councillor, Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Worship. So yeah, I guess from a staffing perspective, given the timeline, what would be the next step? Are we comfortable with coming back to the next meeting? Do we want to maybe allow Lawrence to Lawrence? How, I guess the question is, how long would it take to make these adjustments, and what the next step would be for what I call final approval, so that we can go for the application, is I guess the direction we're looking for.
Mr. Cudlip.
Yeah, it would only take us, thank you. Let me just make sure it would only take us a couple of days to tweak the plan. We are in the midst of what maybe not everyone realized this. We actually did a 3-dimensional scan of the building. We're pulling together a 3-dimensional model of the entire building, including the additions. So there's two components that we can certainly upgrade, and will upgrade the plan as per this discussion to show some tweaks the way we've talked about them today. But in the slightly longer run, we'll actually have some fairly, I would say, demonstrative 3-dimensional views of the building as proposed, both inside and outside. And the purpose of those is to enhance the application we're going to be making on well, not on your behalf, but with Manny and his team's help. So you'll get more than 2-dimensional drawings. There'll be a fairly convincing set of 3-dimensional views of the proposed building that I think will be an extremely advantageous tool for everyone to really see what we're proposing.
Thank you, Mr. Carlep. I think the 3D version would be fantastic to look at. And so timelines for that, sir. So our next council meeting would be June the 8th. Would that be enough time to put that together and come back to us?
Yep, should be. Yep.
So council, this is the last moment. So if you have any other thoughts, comments before it goes to the 3D version, I really liking how we're going here. I'm liking the conversation that we've had before and now, and all the information that's been put forward to our team and to Mr. Cudlip's team has been put on paper, and it's looking really well. So any other further comments, thoughts at this time? Councillor Craven.
Yeah, I was just thinking, as long as Manny can have some idea from the infrastructure people as to how much tweaking could take place after we get a final plan sort of thing. If we could have that kind of answer kind of at the next meeting too.
Yep, thank you. Mr. Barron will look into that. Other thoughts? All right, I think we have a good discussion on this. So I need a mover and a seconder, please. The motion is that the presentation of PMD Arena AODA upgrades by SEMA, Lawrence Cudlip, Senior Director, Architecture, be received for information. Need a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Ottens, Councillor Craven. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cudlip.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Next, we have up item 7.2. We have another presentation from RLB Chartered Professional Accountants. I think we have Murray Short here. Murray, welcome.
Hello, thank you. Yes, so appreciate the opportunity to discuss the audit of the Township of Mapleton for the year ended December 31st, 2020. The audited financial statements themselves will be presented later in the agenda. John Morrison, obviously the treasurer for the township, will be presenting those financial statements as part of his report. So my delegation is just to walk through some of the key operating measures that we present to council each year. Before I do so, I do want to thank John and the rest of the township staff. As you can imagine, doing an audit remotely it is not an easy thing. We certainly would much rather be in person at your office, doing all of our work there, and attending meetings before council in person as well. But we were able to kind of get through the process as we would have otherwise and been as diligent in working through the audit process. And obviously getting to the point where we are today, which is presenting our audit findings. The audit went smoothly. We had no concerns. We had no disputes with management or challenges with the audit process. And of course, we're kind of a year plus into this pandemic, so we've gotten quite used to doing audits remotely. But as I said, we'd certainly rather be doing them in person. So I'm just going to share my screen here and walk through the graphs. As I mentioned, the financial statements will be presented later in the agenda. They are management's financial statements. And our audit report is attached to those, and you'll see that on pages 54 and 55 of the report. So for the time being, then, I will start with the graphs, which you should be seeing on screen now, I do believe. Can I just get confirmation? You can see the graphs on screen now? Yeah, I'm seeing some nods. Great. So we did change these up somewhat. So I'll explain some of the changes that we've made. We try to make them as relevant as possible, give some of the information that we consider to be most pertinent for the municipality and for all of our municipal clients when we make these presentations to council. The first one we haven't really changed. It just shows expenditures by department. As with most of our municipalities being kind of rural municipalities in Wellington and Dufferin County, almost half of your expenditures coming from the Transportation Services Department. However, you do have a fair amount, obviously, in the Environmental Services and other departments as well, Protection, General Government, and so on. So that's just provided for information. But as we move on, this is page number 15 of the package. This is a new graph where we're comparing cash equivalents as a percentage of total cash outflows for each given year. So what this graph is showing is a steady improvement over time. You can see a bit of a dip in 2019 based on the capital expenditures in that year. But the organization's cash position has grown and strengthened quite significantly, certainly going back to 5 years ago and prior. The 146.5 that you can see here suggests that the municipality has almost a year and a half worth of cash outflows sitting in cash and cash equivalents. Obviously, for a municipality, that's prudent because of the fact that you need to maintain reserves and reserve funds for contingencies and capital purchases and so on. So it's just a comment that as you've grown your reserve funds and your financial position has strengthened over the last 5 years. The next graph is our depiction of taxes receivable. We did change this one as well this year. In prior years, we just showed taxes receivable as a percentage of the municipality's own tax levies. This year, we changed it to include all tax levies. Obviously, the municipality collects and pays out taxes to the county and the school boards. So this is your total taxes receivable as a percentage of all of the taxes that you levy, including those on behalf of the county and school boards. Just gives a better depiction of kind of the status of your receivables relative to some of our other clients. So what this graph is showing at 6.4%, the average, your taxes receivable is below the average of our other municipalities. It means that your municipality's done a good job on collecting those taxes receivable, and it has been below for each of the last 3 years. So that's certainly a positive. We do see a bit of an uptick in 2020. That's not surprising. There's also a bit of an increase across the rest of our clients, and that's fairly typical. A lot of municipalities waived interest, penalties and interest on delayed tax payments this year because of COVID, and so we did see an uptick on a number of our municipal clients. This graph shows long-term debt as a percentage of total tax revenue. In your case, the municipality spent quite significantly on capital expenditures in 2016. Many of those were unfinanced at the time and then financed in 2017. So although there was a big capital expenditure made in 2016, the debt to finance some of that was in 2017. So you can see that your debt position jumped up in 2017. And then as the municipalities paid that down, that position has improved quite steadily, and we can expect to continue to see that in future years. I'm not concerned about the debt load at all. It's well within the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing's debt load requirements and debt repayment limits and so on. So no concern from that standpoint. Your municipalities use debt when it's needed to fairly expeditiously. Some of our other municipalities haven't. And there may be implications on their funding of their infrastructure as a result. So we don't have a concern with this debt load. We just show it for comparative purposes. As far as reserves and reserve funds, as I said, your municipality has grown its reserves and reserve funds over the last 5 years. They are stronger in terms of dollar value relative to your tax base than our other municipalities. And so you can see that here. The green line being the Township of Mapleton, you have about more than double your tax revenue sitting in reserves and reserve funds. Again, prudent for future capital expenditures and contingency purposes and so on. So a strong reserve and reserve fund position. You haven't depleted them for some of that capital work that other municipalities might do. So just a comment that your municipal reserves and reserve funds are strong. In the past, we split these out between obligatory and internally restricted, those set aside by council. We've just combined them. Although there's different purposes intended for some versus others, it kind of gives a more full picture to have them combined into one graph, easier to comprehend on a collective basis. The next graph, moving on to page 17 of the package, is capital additions as a percentage of total tax revenue. As I mentioned, fairly significant capital expenditures in fiscal 2016, about $7.5 million that we'll see in the next graph. So you can see the big amount of expended capital additions there. But otherwise, your municipality has been fairly close to the average for other municipalities in terms of your expenditures on capital additions relative to your tax base. A little bit of a dip this year, but in the other 3 of the other 4 years, you were above, considerably well above in 2016 and pretty well bang on where other municipalities were in 2019. So no concern from that standpoint either. And this just highlights the point I made in terms of your capital expenditures in 2016. about $7.5 million. Your average tends to be somewhere in the $3.5 to $4 million range. You can see that there was more than that in 2019. That did drop down your cash position at the end of the 2019 year, as I mentioned previously. This year was a little more consistent with what we'd expect at about 3.5 or so. And that just shows relative to your capital budgets each year and then your amortization. Amortization being generally fairly more consistent from one year to the next. And then lastly, we have a graph showing capital additions by funding source. I mentioned this already, but in 2016, this was largely unfinanced at the time. It was spent out of your kind of cash position in 2016, but then financed through loans taken in 2017. A lot of that work in 2016 related to the new maintenance facility, but there's also storm sewer work, roads and bridges and culverts. So fairly extensive expenditures in 2016, more consistent expenditures through the remaining 4 years. And just the financing shows a portion of that coming from tax levies, some from reserves and reserve funds. And unfortunately, this year there was some coming from capital grants, but on the whole, not a whole lot of capital grants coming out of the federal and provincial governments in recent years. So those are some graphs to give a bit of context to the numbers. As I mentioned, when John's report comes up later in the agenda, he'll be walking through the financial statements themselves, as well as some variances and so on. I'll leave it at that and see if there's any questions, but otherwise, John has more information to come in his report.
Thank you, Mr. Short. If you could stop sharing your view, thank you.
Yep.
So we have questions from members of council then on this report. Any questions at all? All right. So I do have the recommendation here that the presentation of summary of 2020 key operating measures by RLB Chartered Professional Accountants, Murray Short Partner, be received for information. Moved by Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Ottens. Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
And the next we have item number 9, reports and updates from staff. The first thing we have is item 9.1.1, Mapleton Water and Wastewater Master Plan work. The recommendation here is that the Township Mapleton Council receive report CL 2021-05 dated May 25th, 2021 regarding Mapleton Water and Wastewater Master Plan work plan as information. Moved by Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Craven. Thank you. Mr. Barron.
Not much to add to the report, just in my opinion, very exciting. We're going to start engaging the public with regards to the master plan, and it just seems like a long time coming, but you can tell that we're getting there. So as staff had promised, we're keeping you up to date with as much information as we possibly can. So yeah, master plan started or starting, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you. Questions from members of council? Councillor Craven.
I just wonder how the planning for the water tower is coming, Gary. Are we in the tendering business yet on it, or what's happening with that?
Mr. Barron.
Yeah, thank you. We received the results on Friday, so we're just going through the results of the tender, and we'll be able to report back to council at the next council meeting the results.
Thank you. Further questions, comments? Councillor Douglas? No? Anybody else? But I read the recommendation already, and all those in favor? That's carried. Next up, we have item 9.2, This is economic development. The recommendation that the Township of Mapleton Council receive Economic Development Report ED 2021-05 dated May 25th, 2021 regarding Economic Development Department update for information. This is going to be moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Douglas. Thank you. Mr. Ali Cripps.
Thank you, through your worship. So this is just a bit of an update report letting you know what's going on in the Economic Development Department. We have lots of things going on. These are just some of the highlights. So we came to council the end of last year with some CIP for our financial incentive program. So we're just saying we still have about $8,000 in this year's budget to give out to businesses. These are still some of the projects that are ongoing. There was some delays due to COVID and stuff, but we're excited to still have some money left for businesses, but seeing lots of good development going on. Us, as well as the Town of Minto and Township of Wellington North, launched last month, I believe, the Jobs and Housing portal. So it's nwjobsandhousing.ca. This is a portal for any of our businesses to go on to add their jobs if they're looking for any, and anybody in the area looking for jobs. So we're excited to partner up with the two municipalities. We found there was some efficiencies on doing that and better getting the word out about the website. We've seen quite a few of our businesses already using it, looking for staff. The Brna results. So Greg did kind of highlight on last meeting the 3 grants that have come from the county. So we just wanted to really highlight that came from our own businesses. When we did our surveys, we had 52 respondents from Mapleton, and that was one of the big programs that came out of the county funding, and we're excited for our businesses to be able to apply for that funding. Working with the Recreation Department and the Fire Department, we're going to do a Canada Day bag instead of our normal celebration. With COVID, we really can't plan a celebration. We hope to in the future again, but we really can't plan a big event. So we're hoping to do Canada Day bags for families to come pick up and celebrate Canada Day with us still as a township. And then with the Recreation Department as well, we are working on a Mapleton pop-up farmers market. So I know Mapleton used to have a farmers market. We're looking at bringing it back. With COVID, there are a lot more restrictions this year. So we're looking at just doing a pop-up once a month between June, July, August, and September, and looking at doing it during the week so that we can not interfere with the local surrounding municipalities markets that a lot of them are on Saturday. But we're busy and I'm here for any questions.
Thanks, Ali. Questions, comments from members of council? Councillor Ottens.
Thank you, through you, your worship. To Ali. So the first farmers market will be June 16 already. Is that the date that I?
Yes, it will be the 16th.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Other questions, comments from this really good report? Thank you, Ali, so much for putting it together and keeping us up to date on what is going on in economic development. It's very important that we are knowledgeable what's happening, and you did a great job here with this report. But I am excited for the Mapleton pop-up markets, and I'm glad to see that we have some responses. I know that Bob Eby, I talked to him on the weekend, and he would like to get involved in that as well. If you don't have him on your list yet, and Eby Honey is wanting to get involved in our market. Other thoughts, questions from council members? Nope. All right, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Ali.
Thanks.
Next, we have item 9.3.1. This is the 2020 year-end report. The recommendation that Township Mapleton Council receive finance report FIN 2021-12 regarding the 2020 year-end operating variances and surplus as information, and further that council approves the 2020 audited financial statements. Mover, please. Councillor Ottens, second by Councillor Douglas. Thank you. Mr. Morrison.
Through you, your worship. The year-end report is a continuation of the discussions we had through 2020 of some of the operating pressures. But it's also, I'm attempting here to give you a filter about how you should interpret the financial statements. We're doing two different methods of accounting, and it's for non-accountants, I would think that looking at the two is confusing and difficult to interpret. On one hand, I'm telling you our operating surplus was $485,000, but the financial statements are saying we're close to $2.7 million in income. And there's a lot of specific reasons for that in terms of how various items are handled from an accounting point of view. Amortization would be an example where we're looking at how assets are being consumed versus our reserve and reserve fund, which is looking at the replacement value of those assets. So the best way I would interpret that is go back to our long-term financial plan and look at the pillars upon which we're asking you to look at all financial information. So to remind you, and we don't have these discussions enough, but we talk about financial sustainability. And when we talk about that, what we really are meaning is, are we maintaining our services? Are we replacing our assets? Are we ensuring that the tax rates and the rate payers for the water and wastewater is done in a planned, controlled way in which it is predictable and not subject to wild swings? We're also looking at our vulnerability. So what happens when some of our external funding reduces or is removed? So you could look at some of the areas in the financial statements and see there's been negative swings about that. And we could also look at our financial flexibility with respect to how we have to respond to market conditions or events outside of our control. 2020 is a great year because in terms of having no control over the financial costs of the pandemic. So we're actually able to quantify some of the pressures that we've received at year end through 2020 and how we are financially positioned to respond to that. Some of the graphs that we just saw from Murray highlights that in a very clear fashion, just how we've improved our flexibility and have reduced our reliance on external funding and have strengthened our stability for the long-term financing of ensure that the rates and the tax rate and the ratepayers are maintaining a stable environment. So it's a difficult concept in terms of reconciling the both together. So I thought we'd just go through some of the key highlights that I would like to point out to you. And then I would field questions if you felt that you needed to understand how the financial statements are actually indicating how these pressures are being felt. So in just in terms of the taxation area, I made note that our relief mitigation measures that we undertook to deal with the pandemic through March through to basically September saw that our revenues from interest and penalties is dropped by $215,000. So we simply lost or far gone revenue of a huge magnitude. And yet the relief from the Safe Restart agreement from the federal and provincial provided us for $217,000. So on one hand, they provided us relief, and on the other hand, we mitigated that right back to the taxpayers in terms of financial relief. And even though if you look at our financial statements, the year-over-year changes in tax receivable, our tax receivable has gone up according to Murray's schedule. We're still doing relatively better than some of our some of our sister municipalities out there who are also in the same environment. In terms of our 485,000, the proceeds of disposition, because we are working on a cash basis in municipal government, accounts for a good size of our reserves of 485. So it was the fact that we sold these two properties and brought in over $360,000 is enabling us to have a very healthy reserve. Environmental services contributed a little bit of money to the overall bottom line this year, because even though, again, our mitigation measures to help the ratepayers cost us $90,000 in foregone revenue, we also didn't incur further financing costs because of our exploration of the RFP with seeking alternate financial arrangements. Recreational culture services, we're seeing a huge impact in our revenues, almost 30% in every area that we saw a reduction in the financial pressure. Some of this was offset by some reduced expenditures, particularly in our utilities, but it was not enough to remove it completely as a financial pressure. We've talked about the significant sales in the past in the Holland Cemetery. We've talked about some of the programs that our social and family services have undertaken in partnership with New Horizon and the United Way of Wealth in terms of funding relief for our taxpayers. So a lot of the general themes have stayed pretty steady through the last 4 quarters. Overall, our reserves are healthy. If you look at page 18 of the financial statements, you can actually see on page 18 the various balances of those reserves. That's a very healthy reserve in order for us to move forward in terms of our ability to maintain our programs, our services, and our infrastructure. And we have been continuing to respect the taxpayers and the ratepayers. I remind you that at budget time, we used our tax rate stabilization account to mitigate downwards the pressure that we saw from the financial year end of 2020. And it's apparent I believe that has been a common practice throughout most of Ontario, who are using reserves to mitigate these kind of pressures. So we are showing a great deal of financial flexibility in terms of our ability to fund these programs. And by the way, the current fund on page 18, the 485,000 is the surplus that you have from the operating to variance. So the financial statements are basically reinterpreting in a great deal of detail and pulling out in all sorts of different views the kind of information that will help you interpret it, whether and how we're proceeding with our long-term financial plan in terms of bringing it to life and implementing it so that we are providing that stability and reducing our vulnerability and increasing our flexibility for environmental considerations. So in terms of this tax rate stabilization account, we actually reduced our burden on the taxpayer by 2% in 2021. I'm not sure how much detail I should go into the financial statements, because each statement is a set of complex detail that can make non-accountants, the eyes glaze over from non-accountants. So I don't want to get too marred in the detail here, other than in cash and short-term investments, we have over $18 million in the bank. Yes, our receivables have gone up and our trade receivables have gone up because of the pandemic, but we're still relatively healthy, again, going back to Murray Short's graphs relative to other municipalities. In fact, these financial statements are indicating that our cash position has improved yet again between 2019 and 2020. Even though from our income statements, we're seeing some of our grant funding, conditional grant funding, not the unconditional, has been reduced, mostly as a result of a lack of applications that we could apply to, or in terms of we don't qualify for those applications, and that we're very financially self-reliant right now in order to fund our capital program. I'm not sure at this point, given the complexity of the statements and the detail, I would be happy to answer any questions. But again, as I would look at these statements and trying to reconcile what I give you each quarter to the financial statements, again, I would try to think about how is the information we're presenting you, is it impacting our planned rates? How are we reducing our vulnerability and from external sources? And should the market conditions exist out there, like a pandemic or any other unknown market condition at a moment in time, how are we able to respond? Can we increase our debt capacity? The answer is yes, if we had to. Can we increase our tax rates? The answer is yes, if we had to. Do we have enough money already there to fund a lot of our programs? Yes, we have the money that we are funding our program. Have we done that in a reasonably and responsible way? I think we have done that, and we've actually, again, reduced the tax burden on the taxpayers, even though they might not recognize it because of tax increases from other levels of government. From this Township of Mapleton, that burden has gone down by at least 2%. So through you, Your Worship, I'm prepared to answer any questions that I might have confused people with my presentation.
Thanks, Mr. Morrison. Clear as mud on our end. Great job with the report and for clearing up some of the information for us. Questions from members of council then to Mr. Morrison. You must have done a great job. Oh wait, Marlene's up. Councilor Ottens.
So thank you, through you, Mayor Davidson. So I guess the takeaway here is that you're saying that our township is being managed responsibly in a financial way, and that we can continue the way we're going as far as offering what we offer.
Morrison.
Through you, Your Worship. Exactly. I think what we're trying as councillors, you should think about what is the tax rates and how you're going to impact those tax rates in the term of your council. What are you planning to spend over the next 10 years? Are we replacing, are we setting aside enough money so that we're not actually creating a burden for the next council and the next generation of citizens out there who will have to foot the bill? And the financial results and the trend lines that have been presented, they're all indicating, yeah, it's so far working, and it's coming together.
Good, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councilor Ottens. Very good. And you know what, I just have to give praise for Mr. Morrison and the financial team. When they came up with a plan of a 3-year budget program and looking at the numbers, we didn't anticipate a pandemic. We didn't anticipate, financial losses. And yet here we are at this stage relatively in good financial position. If this continues to go on longer, this pandemic, then we're still in good shape. And that's due to Mr. Morrison and the finance team for leading us through this. Further questions, comments? Nothing else? All right, thank you so much, Mr. Morrison. So I did have that recommendation I read out to you. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Item 9.3.2 is the treasurer's statement. Recommendation here is that the Township of Mapleton Council receive finance report FIN 2021-13 dated May 25th, 2021 regarding the 2020 treasurer's statement, development charges reserve fund as information. Mover, please. Councillor Martin, thank you. Councillor Craven seconding. Thank you. Mr. Morrison again.
Through you, your worship. This is a standard report required by the regulations, and that we are required to report to the community the various balance of the different development charges that we've collected, what interest that we've have accrued to those different DCs that we've collected, and what expenditures that we spent money on in each area. In this year, we've not spent any or used any of the funds. We are still in negative balances, which is permitted by the legislation for fire protection and administrative studies. Overall, we have $1.2 million in DC funds, which we'll probably be utilizing within the next year or two with respect to some of the current capital programs that are on the horizon. This statement will simply be posted on our website and would be provided if the Ministry of Finance are asked for it.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Questions to Mr. Morrison? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? It's carried. Moving on to item 9.3.3. Recommendation here is that the Township of Mapleton Council receive finance report FIN 2021-14 dated May 25th, 2021 regarding additional financial disclosure requirements for the 2021 budget year pursuant to Ontario Regulation 249/09 as information. Mover, please. Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Ottens. Thank you. Mr. Morrison again.
Through you, your worship. Again, this is a disclosure is required under the regulations. It's regarding three areas: amortization, post-employment benefit expenses, and solid waste landfill closure and post-closure expenses. The only area that is area of concern for the Township of Mapleton is the amortization expense. And the other two areas, we do not have any post-employment benefits being given to any of our employees, so therefore it's not relevant, and we do not operate landfill waste sites, and therefore that is not relevant. Should there be any introduction of standards with respect to the wastewater treatment plants, that might be relevant, but at the moment in time, that's not. The only area that we have is we do not budget for amortization expense because we budget for the transfer to the reserve from the reserve funds, which theoretically is the replacement costs for our assets rather than consuming our historical costs. So the reason that there's disclosure is that if you ever see that our transfer to reserve and reserve funds is less than the amortization costs, you should be questioning why that's happening, because we may not be budgeting correctly.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Questions from members of council? Seeing none, I'll then call the question. All those in favor of receiving this? That's carried. Thank you. Correspondence for council's information. There's quite a few on there. Anybody wish to speak to any of those? Nobody? Mr. Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 12.1, Senior of the Year. Is this something we are going to participate in?
Mr. Barron?
Thank you, through your worship. Yeah, Helen Edwards is going to put together a list of worthy candidates, and we'll come back to council and present those candidates at the next meeting.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Martin. And your answer, Mr. Barron. Further questions? Mr. Martin again?
Just further to that, I do want to say that it's a May 31st deadline for this program, but I could be mistaken. I don't have it in front of me.
We can, through your worship, we can absolutely email them to council to meet that deadline.
Thank you, Councilor Martin. Further thoughts? Anything else need to be brought up for here? Okay, we'll move on then. Notices of motion. Number 15, other business. Mr. Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just thinking throughout this meeting, since we've been talking about the PMD stuff, would it be possible to create some sort of a public input into this project as well? I know we're running on timelines, but if we can, get 200 responses for the color of the water tower, I'm sure a project like this, considering the investment that we're looking at and the potential altering of the service level, the improvement that we're looking at, I'm sure there might be, I think it's appropriate that the public might have some input in it. Is that something we could look at, whether it's a Survey Monkey or a public meeting, or, I'm just wondering what kind of support would be out there for something like that. It'd obviously have a pretty quick turnaround, right?
So you're looking at something over and above the Parks and Rec Committee?
Absolutely.
We are on a tight timeline, Mr. Barron. I don't know if we can fit that in there, Councilor Martin, but we are, Mr. Barron.
Through your worship, I believe the appropriate person and the professional on that is Ali, that would take care of that. I'm not sure if you can comment, Ali.
I think we could put it out. Most of our Survey Monkeys get a lot of traction right away. So it would be on what we want to ask kind of in it.
So Councilor Martin, if I'm assuming correctly, you would put on the latest edition or rendition of what we were talking about and ask for public input through that Survey Monkey. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, and I think that's a great starting point, right? We've got these plans that might get picked up now as a public interest piece after this meeting. But if we'd be able to flag that through Ali's channels that she's got at her disposal, just to raise an awareness, and, whether that's just to get affirmation of, this is, a multi, maybe going the multi-sport route is, we're right on track, right? Or there might be some other ideas that we haven't even thought of yet, right? We got some pretty smart minds out here. I think I think it'd be nice if we get the public input on it.
Thank you, Councilor Martin. I do always like having the public input if we can manage that. And I know we are on a tight timeline. I can't remember the date of the actual application have to be in. I think it's beginning of July. Certainly we can get on that right away and put something out to the public. And I'm assuming that it's going to be picked up by the media and put in next week's newspaper as well. So that'll be picking up some of the others that may be knocking on social media, and they can always contact any one of us with their thoughts, and we can move that forward. But certainly, I was just the clerk Wheeler reminded me that our next meeting is not June 8th, but June 15th. So depending on the timelines, we might have to have an additional meeting just on that one piece, depending on what we come up with. But certainly, I think, Ali, we can get onto that as soon as possible, and we can get some feedback. Thank you, Councilor Martin, for bringing that up. And once we figure out our timelines, hopefully we can get this all set and ready to go, so we don't miss the deadline. Hate to see that happen, because this is a great project. I think it's something the community would really pick up on and need, and I can see it being well used. This whole piece. Any further other business thoughts, Councillor Douglas?
Yes, thank you. Just weighing in on that, rather than a survey monkey, because I'm trying to figure out what to ask and how to frame things. Like, I like the idea of just having people email us their ideas and broadcast it that way, because there's more freedom for input that way, and we can share any responses that we have.
And just brainstorming here, it might be, the survey monkey might be part of it, sending people emails. Maybe we do a quick public meeting over Zoom and get people's thoughts through the public meeting. That'd be opened right up as well. We could probably do that in the next couple of weeks and do that. I think that's probably a really appropriate way of opening it up for people that want to join in and give comments. Normally we'd have our coffee with council or something like that we'd get some comments, but I think if we could put something together for next week, maybe for a public meeting to open it up, I think that'd be, or maybe the week after. I don't know. We'll figure out the timelines, and I'll get back to council on what's the best approach. Councilor Martin?
I like that idea too. Would you be thinking that people would still need to register, or could we do it like an open mic kind of?
I would open it up. I'd have an open mic, just have everybody there and call them, sort of like we did when we were at the arena and invited people coming up to the mic when they were talking about a subdivision plan. Same idea, come up and speak. We have to have some kind of order though, because it's Zoom. We don't want everybody speaking at once. So maybe the raise hand function would be something we'd use on the Zoom. Okay, anything further? All right, so that's the other business. We don't have a closed session today. Mr. Wheeler is feeling the pain of that. He likes our closed sessions. So we do right now go to the confirmatory bylaw, item 17.1, and the recommendation here that the bylaw number 2021-039 being a bylaw to confirm all actions and proceedings of the council of the corporation of the Township of Mapleton be hereby read a first, second, and third time, signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with a corporate seal. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Douglas, Councillor Ottens, thank you. All those in favor? Thank you very much. We are now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.